Hey guys, this is Colin Moshman for CardsChat.com, and we're continuing on right now with me and Katie's course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days, with the topic of day 22 being unpredictable play. And so far we've talked about bluffing and semi-bluffing, but most of the play is focused on solid fundamental strategy, and today's concept is going to expand that in a slightly new direction. So let's begin with why play unpredictably. And I want you to imagine that you have someone on your left, and he's only 3-betting premium hands pre-flop. So the question I ask you is, would you be happy if he also started 3-betting some hands like 5-4 suited? And for me at least, the answer is no, because initially we had a very easy strategy against him. We just raised a lot of hands, then we fold all but premium hands the rare times that he 3-bets. But now we have to start playing a guessing game. And the general concept here is that good players, yourself included, can exploit any really obvious or predictable tendencies that an opponent has. So for example, only 3-betting strong hands or only checking the flop with weak hands. And we're going to prevent that when we're up against thinking players, with one method for preventing it being to work in this light 3-bet range to stay aggressive and unpredictable against them. So part of this goes to the difference between exploitive and GTO play. And you've probably heard GTO before. It stands for Game Theory Optimal. And the idea behind GTO play is you're asking what is the best overall strategy to have, whereas for exploitive play, you're looking at a specific opponent. You're saying, against this guy, what is the best strategy? So it might not be the best strategy in general. A good player might be able to easily exploit it, but it takes advantage of a flaw in your opponent. So let's take a look at a different example of that. Let's say we're talking about betting the river in position. So the game theory optimal strategy is to have some mix of value bets and bluffs, which is going to depend on your river bet sizing. So that's what you might do against a top player. Whereas against a maniac in a free roll, okay, so this guy is drunk, he's high, he's never folded in his life. Like if he's got 7 high, he's going to be thrilled to call you. So against this guy, GTO play is not going to be the most profitable. It's going to be the most profitable is exploitive play and have no mix of value bets and bluffs, but simply to only value bet him. And if you're only value betting somebody, they could profitably adjust and only call you with strong hands, but we assume if we have our read right that this player is not going to do it. So again, there's this difference between the GTO and the exploitive approaches, and light 3-bets are going to have us tend toward the GTO and away from just the exploitive. So before we continue on, I want to talk about this idea of blockers, which are cards that are significant only because your opponent can't have them. So for example, if you re-raise a hand like ace-3 offsuit pre-flop, then usually you're just relying on that ace blocker. Okay, so you don't have a strong hand, but it's less likely that your opponent has pocket aces or ace-king since you hold an ace. Another example is an Omaha. A common one is the naked ace bluff. So let's say there are 3 spades out there, and you only have 1 spade, but it's the ace of spades. That means your opponents cannot have the ace of spades. So you bluff knowing that you have that ace of spades blocker. So with that said, let's talk about how to incorporate late 3-betting into our game. And you want to target players capable of folding. So this is often going to be regulars. Okay, like we've said, the best players to incorporate unpredictable play against are going to be good players who are capable of picking up on predictable tendencies, and anyone else who's capable of folding to aggression, who maybe has a higher fold to 3-bet stat on a HUD, is going to be someone that's good to target. Now the hands you want to choose are ones where you can easily fold facing 4-bet, so you don't want to 3-bet and then not know what to do if your opponent 4-bets you. And the other thing is they should either play well post-flop, so for example, on the opening slide we said 7-5 suited, so that works pretty well, or blockers. So in particular, pre-flop, that's usually going to mean an ace or a king. And we're about to look at a lot of examples of this, but I want to do one more bonus GTO principle, which is for river bluffing. Okay, so if you're at the river, your opponent checks to you, or you could be out of position as well, then like we said, you're supposed to have some mix of value bets and bluffs against a good player. And one way to decide on which hands to bluff is to pick the hands at the absolute bottom of your range. So if, for example, you raise a hand like 6-5 suited on the button and you've been betting the whole way, you only have 6 high, some kind of bust or draw at the river, this is usually going to be a GTO bluff because you're the worst possible hand. Those hands have the most to gain. So you're going to be value betting your strongest hands and bluffing your worst hands. And similarly, if you're at or near the top of your range and your opponent bets, then if you fold, that's going to be very exploitable, right? Because if you're at the top of your range and you still fold to an opponent bet, that means that you basically have no calling range. That if he bets, you are always going to fold. So if you want to incorporate GTO in your game, you can think if you're near the top of your range, and if so, be more likely to call or bluff catch the river. So I imagine that not all of this is going to make perfect sense right now, but it's a good idea to start thinking about these more advanced concepts, and they will definitely come in time. For now, I want to look at specific examples of late 3-betting and unpredictable play in action. So our first hand here, King 5 offsuit in the big blind. All these are going to be hands played by myself, so I'll come in the spotlight here. And the small blind has made a 2.5x raise. And we're going to talk in 2 days from today about defending the big blind. And like we'll see there, this is a spot where you have to call. The reason for that is because here we're getting better than 3-to-1 odds. We have position, and we have an average or even slightly above average hand in our King 5 offsuit. So we can definitely call, and that's the play I would make here most often. But some of the time, I'm going to make a late 3-bet, which is what I do here. And this is pretty much taking advantage of the blocker. So we have the king blocker, and makes it less likely that our opponent has some of these strong hands. This hand does not play all the well post-flop, so we benefit from having some pre-flop fold equity. And it's also a very easy fold if he 4-bets. So an example of a hand that doesn't meet that is, let's say, ace-9 offsuit. That's a pretty strong hand blind versus blind. So I wouldn't want a 3-bet fold or a 3-bet call, and therefore I usually would not 3-bet that hand. If we did 3-bet it, we'd probably stack off pre-flop. But anyway, this one meets a lot of boxes, so similar time here. We can make this play. If our opponent folds, that's great. If he 4-bets, we're out of the hand. Here's a hand from the beginning of a spin and go or jackpot format. Here with the ace-7 offsuit, this hand is too weak to call in the small blind. You could fold, which is completely fine, but here I like to put out the 3-bet. And I don't actually love the sizing. The sizing is a little bit too small. I would rather out of position go more like 110 or 120. But I get called by both opponents, the big blind and the button. And our plan now is going to be to check fold. It's a coordinated flop. We've missed. And when that happens, we're just going to give up in a multi-way situation. So the flop gets checked around and we connect with the turn. So now I'm betting for value. If one of these players had an 8 or a 9, particularly the button, he's very likely to bet that hand at the flop. So I'm betting here because I think I have the best hand. My opponent calls. He's going to have a lot of draws in his range, in particular 10x kind of hands, some flush draws. So my plan at the river is to check and then call if he bets, hoping to induce a bluff from a busted draw, which is what happens here. Next hand is 9-8 suited, and one category for late 3-betting we didn't talk about in the presentation is to apply ICM pressure. And this is another topic that will be coming up and we're going to talk about a lot, but this is going to be on the bubble of a 9-man sit and go. And we cover our opponent in the cutoff. So this is a good spot because even if he's not a reg, he's probably not going to be very loose playing against 3-bets when he is actually third in chips here on the bubble. So we can 3-bet him more often. He calls, and we're going to see bet the vast majority of flops. It's nice we pick up a flush draw. When we do this, we're going to be double barreling on most turn cards. So probably I'm going to bet any turn besides an 8 or a 9, which gives me some showdown value. Here's another one from the same kind of spot. So here this time this player is actually the second chip leader, and I wouldn't normally 3-bet 8-3 suited in the small blind. But here the reason why I make this play is purely to pressure a player who's likely to be risk averse on a 9-man sit and go bubble. And again, if he were to 4-bet here, it's a pretty easy decision, right? Obviously we're going to fold. So the kind of hand that I would definitely flat would be if I had King Jack suited. I wouldn't want to 3-bet fold, so I would normally flat there. But this hand we can 3-bet and fold. Another one that's pretty straightforward. So this is the kind of play where there's nothing else going on. It's not, for example, like their final table pay jumps. And the best time to make it is against regular players or people that you have some kind of read on, like a high pre-flop fold to 3-bet percent. So if we didn't re-raise here, we would fold. So it's not like we're taking a hand that's profitable to call, like Ace-10 suited, and instead doing something different with it. We're taking a hand that we have no other profitable use for. If he 4-bets, we're going to fold. If he calls, we have a disguised hand that plays well post-flop. And again, I wouldn't make this play against a crazy opponent or against an unknown low-stakes opponent. I'm only going to do this against a regular player or someone that I have a line on how they're approaching the game. Here's another one. So this is, I believe, the first table of an 18-man. And Radaboom 1 is a good regular player. I have a lot of hands against him. And so here I 3-bet. This is taking advantage of the ace blocker. I would rather have usually some kind of hand like the 10-8 suited. So play to use sparingly. But I do make it here. And the small blind, whose recreational opponent, is going to call as well as Radaboom. So given this, unless I connect in some way or it's a very dry flop, I'll usually be giving up. And now we face a decision as to whether or not we call this off. And here the answer for me is definitely yes. And I wouldn't really approach this so much as how many outs do I have with my draw, but instead that I think against a donk bet shove. So instead of checking to the razor, he's just jamming, even though I'm the one who has the pre-flop betting lead. So I think I'm going to have the best hand with top pair, okay kicker, at least half the time. So considering that there are reasonable pot odds here, I'm just going to go ahead and call it off. Plus those times that I am behind, as a bonus, some of the time my flush draw will be relevant. And in fact, sure enough, it was. So I did get it in bad here. But I did also have the draw. I did also have 9 outs to hit a flush, as well as an additional 3 outs that proved to be the most relevant here to top pair. So I did have a 12-out draw, and it was correct to call given the odds. Another one we 3-bet, so most common play here will be to fold. The tender opens, and so, probably at least 90% of the time, I'm just going to be folding this hand. But when I do know something about my opponent, I do know, for example, that he has HUD stats of, let's say, something like 19/15. He's opening a lot of hands in the cutoff. He's not going to just call out of position with most of his range. If I 3-bet him, then I'll make a play like this. And this is a great hand to do it with. Let's look at another one. So here with the ace-8 offsuit, this is going to be from early in an MTT. And what are our options pre-flop? So if we have ace-8 suited, we can flat this hand, but I don't like doing too much smooth calling out of the small blind because we're out of position on all post-flop betting rounds. We're not getting nearly as good a price as in the big blind. So one option here, we could definitely fold this hand, but the other option is we can 3-bet it. We do have the ace blocker. So that's what I'm going to do here a reasonable amount of the time. This is a good spot to 3-bet. He's also likely to be on a wide range for opening because everyone's folded him on the button. Now, we said earlier we want to have a clear decision facing 4-bet, and we do. So with ace-8 offsuit, I'm definitely not going to play a huge pot. He 4-bets, And well, this might look like, a pretty bad outcome. And of course, we've definitely lost some chips here. We lost 300 extra chips. We stayed out of trouble. We kept our decisions pretty straightforward. And so don't worry about it if some of the time you have to change plans or abandon when a late 3-bet or unpredictable play does not work out. So the only thing left is today's big quiz question of the day. So this is going to be another MTT spot, and this is going to be a two-part question. So the first one is that, assuming we don't know all that much about this player who raised, is this usually going to be a good spot to late 3-bet? Forget about our actual hand, but to incorporate a late 3-betting range. So should we be late 3-betting a lot here? That's part one. And then part two is, if we do make a late 3-bet, would we rather have Jack 9 suited or Queen 8 offsuit? So think about those, pause the video. And the answer to the first part is no. This is usually not going to be a good late 3-bet spot. The reason for that is because we're out of position against somebody who we said we don't know much about. We usually want to be operating on reads or have a good situation like being able to apply a lot of tournament pressure. So in just some random spot where we're out of position against an unknown player, this is not a good spot to be doing much late 3-betting. So part one, no. And for part two, between Jack 9 suited and Queen 8 offsuit, even though Queen 8 offsuit is the stronger hand heads up between the two and has higher equity in a heads up battle, you would rather have the much more post flop playable Jack 9 suited, which is going to be a better late 3-bet candidate. So today's video has been a more advanced one, but we thought it was important to get you guys thinking about introducing more unpredictability into your game, at least when you're up against certain player types like good regular opponents. So use it sparingly for now, just find the best spots to incorporate some of these late 3-bets, and with some time and study, you're going to become much more comfortable and versed in the best aspects of GTO play. So thanks for watching. This has been Colin Moshman for myself and Katie Dozier with the CardsChat.com course, Become a Winning Poker Player in 30 Days.